All right. This is our first sit-down interview. I'm very, very excited. And I want to thank investigative reporter Joey Scott for joining me. Joey, you released a very important story at The Guardian, co-written with, was it Sam Levin?
Yes, Sam Levin, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great story. I want to get right into it. I am going to, for those who are listening, I am going to keep the chat going, but I need to focus on what Joey's telling me. So maybe we'll take a few questions at the end. Joey, it's a big story. So maybe, I also want to let people know real quick. This is just kind of a trigger warning. This is an intense and a tough story. So it does contain, we might talk about, it's a violent and a tragic story. So just to let people know about that in advance, about Savannah Graziano. But yeah, Joey, maybe you could just give us a little background on the story and we'll go from there, man.
Yeah. So the 2 years ago, a Amber Alert was sent out regarding Savannah's abduction. It was sent out after her father had killed her mother in front of her house. He went on the run with his daughter. After that happened, about 24 hours later, Savannah was spotted at a convenience store outside of Hesperia, up there in the high desert. And they called it in, the gas station employee. After that, officers with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department tried to initiate a stop. They were fired on from Savannah's father. And then from there, Savannah's father took them on I believe it was almost 70-mile-ish chase through the high desert on I-15. During that time, the father was shooting back at the police. Mind you, this is an open freeway. So all this is happening with people who just are driving on this freeway. There's gunfire from the driver's side. At one point, the father tries to make a opposite turn up a off ramp. He ends up in the dirt, tries to go up a big old hill. His truck stalls, and at that point, it rolls back towards deputies who are on each side. At which point, deputies just start firing on the pickup truck. Mind you, Savannah is in the pickup truck at this time as well, and just gunfire nonstop. At one point, the truck stops. Savannah gets out on the passenger side and lays down on the ground. At which point, a deputy calls out to her to come to him. And she crouches down and walks over to him. And as she walks past the pickup truck, cops on the other side, from what it looks like, shoot and kill Savannah as she was walking to help. Mind you, none of this is made aware to the public on the situation that actually happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was explained as a shootout on the highway that ends with Savannah dying by the deputies. They really insinuated, kind of trying to exonerate the deputies before all the facts came out, saying that she was wearing tactical gear, that she ran at deputies, that she may have been a participant. All of these claims that police try to get out before the actual story gets out, so they can kind of plant the seeds of doubt. In watching the video, none of those characterizations were accurate. Savannah never ran. As far as tactical gear goes, in what was provided to me, there was no photos of any bulletproof vests. The only thing that was able to be shown was a helmet that she was wearing. What she was wearing, though, was a t-shirt that said Jesus across it, and then a hoodie underneath. So that's what the deputy saw, was this girl who they did not perceive as a threat, because they wouldn't have called her over if that was the case. but they made it sound like she was a threat. So, all of this is kind of like, it goes to like really taking with skepticism how police frame shootings when they happen before the public can actually make up their minds about it.
Yeah. And I think that brings to, I guess, on moving into the journalism and what you do, at what point after that, when did you sort of submit the public records request? When did you realize, was it a day after? When did the work really start?
The work really started, I was watching the case and just kind of keeping an ear down because there wasn't a whole lot being spoken about it. And I thought that was really odd. And then, the last thing I remember hearing was the sheriff insinuating that she may have been a participant. And, my skepticism sort of like turned of like, I highly doubt that, this 15-year-old girl, Amber Alert, you're supposed to save her. Now she's a participant. This seems oddly convenient. So I was like, you know what? In California, there's a public records law, addition to the public records law in 2021, in 2020, that allowed you to get any audio and video recordings from categorical uses of force, such as police shootings. And so I submitted that request in September. And for 2 years, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department refused to release it. Technically, the law requires at most 45 days to release the videos, which departments like LAPD do. They wait until 45 days and then they release critical incident videos, which only show clips. And then obviously they're very like editorial spin on it, which I'm very against in terms of this footage. It should be released in the full and the raw without any of their like influence. And so, it was like 45 days, and then they claimed it was an ongoing investigation, which all of these shootings, when videos are released, are still ongoing investigations. So technically they have a year and very limited circumstances in which they can, not release it. After like a year and a half or so, was like, okay, they stopped responding to me because they would just each month be like, this is an ongoing investigation. We'll update you June something 2023, whatever. And they just kept doing that for each month. And then they just stopped replying to me. And I was like, okay. But it seems to me the world has sort of moved on. There was no news stories about it since like September 2022. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to people who know these records and these laws very well. And that was the First Amendment Coalition. Connected with David Loy there. We talked about it. He kind of gave me some advice at first and was like, if you don't hear back, let us know. He then wrote a very, very like legally, specific letter to the department reminding them of the law. Did not hear anything back after that. At which point, I would say 2 months ago, they were like, okay, we feel like this is a good case. We wanted to kind of set precedent and we'll take it on. And so we drafted a lawsuit and we're going to wait. Well, it was supposed to be right around this time that we were going to submit it. And then before we could even do that, they released the video on Good Friday on Easter weekend.
Wow. So even just knowing that, did they know that it was just the letter basically? So they knew that, things had escalated in terms of the pressure on them, and then the footage comes out.
Yeah, I mean that's that's not something they ever like said to me, but like it wasn't, it was clear that time was running out on their end, and I think they realized that at some point this has to come out, and it will look even worse if we have to be forced to release this footage. and then that footage shows just how awful the situation was, it would have just compounded the I guess optics of it.
Mm.
In my eyes. I
Yeah.
mean, that's my assumption.
Yeah.
They haven't really said shit about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, I was just kind of sitting here thinking about that. Like, it's not that I'm surprised, but I was thinking about this yesterday when I was thinking about this interview that I was going to speak with you. That, I mean, I know this is like an obvious question, but just big picture with these discussions we have about policing and about transparency. It's what they tell you when you're a kid, right? Just like own up to what happened, right? And yes, there's going to be consequences for the officers, that department either way. But now look at what happened. I don't know what it would have been if it came out right away, but this is exactly what I was thinking yesterday. Look at what happened now. Your story in The Guardian, written with it's Sam Levin, right? Yeah. I'm always like, people mispronounce my last name a lot, so I'm always like, I want to get names right. Luckily, you have Joey Scott is like nice. It's easy.
Simple.
Yeah. And now look at what happened. It's BBC. It's like the story is everywhere. Yeah, it's just like just tell the truth. I mean, then you won't have Joey Scott on it, for 2 years finding out what happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, that is now the other part of the story, which is, wow, this thing was tragic and horrible. And also, why did it take 2 years to show the public what actually happened? And you watch the video and you listen to the audio, the deputy that's calling her over tells the cops to stop shooting. Yep. He yells, stop shooting her. He's in the truck. Like, he knows in that moment that what happened was not right. So at least one deputy knows what actually happened. And then, the footage that I got was none of them were wearing body cams. So I got aerial footage, which in terms of like video footage, it got, the whole overview of it. And I think it's rare that you can get something like that. But that actually showed what happened. And you listen to the person in the helicopter say, oh no, right as she gets shot and killed. So, there are multiple people, multiple witnesses, multiple police witnesses that know that what happened was not right and was tragic. And, they knew. And so for 2 years, several people knew what happened was wrong and they didn't tell the public and own up to it. And now, after our reporting, it took several days for San Bernardino sheriffs to release the video I was given. And, the sheriff was like, there's been a lot of misunderstandings and blah, blah, blah about this video. My hope is that everyone watches it to the end. The only misunderstandings about what actually happened have come from the sheriff's department and not from our reporting or anyone else's reporting about what happened.
Right. I mean, the misunderstanding is like we spoke about, waiting 2 years to provide the truth, and there may be even more to come. I mean, I've read your story and I tried to read as much coverage as I could, but it seemed like, would you say there's even more that we might need to know about this story? And if you wanted to comment on that.
The sheriff has not updated the public, citing, that it's in the California Attorney General's hands, and won't comment on, how many times she was shot, where she was shot. Has there been any repercussions or accountability within the sheriff's department about the shooting? Has anyone been let go? Has anyone been reprimanded? How did they handle this? Like, there's so many more questions that have not been answered. That these videos you would hope would clarify, but we got the answer of how she died, and it was tragic, and it shouldn't have happened. And now there's even more questions because of that. And now the sheriff and the California Attorney General are sort of just like sitting on it because it's a ongoing investigation that's been going on for 2 years. So I'm not clear like what there is to be investigated still. But yeah, it's unfortunate that it's taken this long. But obviously, you know, I had no idea when I got it that it would, you know, take off like this. I had thought just people had moved on. And then watching the video, I was like, oh, this is really messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what this job is. I mean, you know, the movie version of it's always, I was thinking, like, it's always hard to portray. Hey, for those who are coming in, by the way, who obviously by now you know Joey's work on this story at The Guardian. If you're new to this channel, I'm an investigative reporter who writes about you know, foreign intelligence and extremism, and for Rolling Stone and Daily Dot. So I wanted Joey. The reason Joey is my first guest is because I wanted to talk not just about this story, but about reporting, which is something that we're doing. Oh, I'll get the full plug in here for the new YouTube channel, which is just my first and last name. So if you're watching on YouTube, awesome. If you're watching on Twitter or I think Twitch, try to subscribe to YouTube, which is Eric Levay, because we're going to be doing ERICLEVAI, because we're going to be doing a lot like this. Now I completely lost my train of thought getting that in there. That's what I was gonna say. That's what this job is. Like the movie version of journalism, which is hard to portray. Like I don't know. Did you see that? You see that documentary, The Octopus, about Danny Castellero?
I watched the first episode and I'm like, oh wow, this could either be like a whole like tinfoil hat sort of thing, or it could actually have happened, which is like, you know, a great like way to start off a show like that.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And the reason I thought of that was that in terms of making like the mechanics of reporting, they're not super interesting visually. Like you have that, or like All the President's Men, like covert meetings in parking garages, like yeah, like I've had some things like that happen. I'm sure you have too, but the reason I'm bringing all this up is the mechanics of what this job is, and transparency is what we're talking about here. 2 years of you just not giving up, and you have your own life too. It's not like you're not spending 24 hours. You have your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's for me, you know, watching The Octopus, that documentary, it shows kind of like how this photographer turned investigative journalist just got consumed by the story, and you see these stacks of like boxes of just papers, and like it just takes a certain person to see a box like that and go, wow, I gotta like go through all this and like start really thinking about the story. And like to me, that's just like, I don't know if it's part of like my ADHD brain or something, but like I get onto something and it's just sort of like, it's not sexy at all. Like you see, there's clips of him like on the ground, like, you know, unrolling these papers and such. And it's just like, it's very, I don't know. It takes a certain person, I guess, to do some of these things. I'm not saying like nobody could do it. I think everyone could be a journalist and an investigative journalist. But yeah, you know, and the thing about it was like, you know, in this case, for 2 years, all I did was submit a records request. And then I just sort of like built out kind of what had happened and like kind of kept that in mind, so that whenever I got it, I was ready to publish something. And so, you know, for 2 years, I wrote other stories, and just every month I would get an email like, it's an ongoing investigation, we can't release it. You know, I do a lot of public records requests. And so a lot of that is a waiting game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, again, back to my ADHD mind of like, wow, I can just do something and forget about it essentially, and like kind of do my research and then just wait for a thing to like come out and then finish the story. I don't know. That's just, it's, for me, it's like a fun way to like, I'm always working on at least 3 or 4 different stories at a time, just because that's just how my mind works. And so, you know, something like this allowed me to report on other stuff too. They're all connected in some way, but like, yeah, I love digging into this stuff. And, you know, I enjoy the challenge of at least the police part of it, because they are so obstructive and not transparent despite all of their efforts to be so. Like, as soon
Really?
as you can kind of like
What made-
poke into there and like get them to like
Yeah.
sort of like, you know, like, to me, I enjoy like that challenge, because it really just shows, you know, in this case, just how much they refuse any transparency or, you know, criticism about what they do.
Yeah.
And that's just the kind of the backstory to all of my reporting about policing. It's just like, they don't want you, they want to do the ABC7 stuff where like, they're like, you know, shine a light on a cop and like, you know, they saved a baby or something, or they frame it, you know, these like crime wave stories. And I think that's awful to the public.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you know, and I guess just to be clear, I actually said this on my live stream yesterday, like, you know, I think there are good investigators out there, and I don't see the world as black and white. I know you don't either, and there's some cops who do good work. I mean, I that doesn't discount though this conversation. Like, I ultimately it's Anthony Graziano who created this situation with murdering Savannah's mother and then creating this what happened. That doesn't change though the disgraceful conduct here that we're talking about that you uncovered. I just want to make sure, I want everybody listening to understand that there a lot happened in this story. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's a situation where like Anthony obviously created the conditions for this sort of thing to happen. That said, you know, the police reacted in a way that created the conditions for Savannah's death as well. And like,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's the complexity of this sort of situation. And, you know, these insinuations that she participated or she was wearing tactical gear or all of these things, whether they're true, say they are all true, none of that would have justified her being killed in those moments.
Right.
And so even if we take the cops at their words and how they describe the situation, Savannah shouldn't have died. And,
Right.
you know, if you watch the video, you see the cops who are shooting down, like in the background, there's traffic going by. So like the other side of the freeway, you know, so we're not even thinking about that. And there's just a lot going on in this scenario that like, I think kind of shows how cops kind of handle these situations. And, you know, especially with abductions and these sorts of like, you know, he was definitely, as you and I probably could infer, a right-wing sort of like chud dude of like, you know, by the amount of weapons he had and sort of like the truck and all of this stuff, like you and I know that like, and kind of where they lived, it was most likely someone who was like very like chud-like and, you know, right-wing to a degree. You know, we kind of have that sort of like sixth sense of like, oh, this dude's probably, you know, a Trump supporter or something, you know, just by kind of the way they carry themselves. And so, yeah, you know, it's just like, these are sort of like the people out in the desert who love guns and love Trump, and like now they're shooting at cops. And I think that's a whole other part of it.
I really want to actually ask you about Anthony Graziano, like, because the when I heard about, especially, so we don't. Let me ask you this: we haven't confirmed one way or the other that his daughter had, like, she was wearing any tactical gear or anything like that, right?
No, from I mean, from the video, like you could see a helmet, I think, but beyond that, there's no like plate carrier like visible or like, you know, arm stuff or like hand stuff, you know, like stuff that you and I look for when we're out covering these sorts of things.
Yeah, okay. We'll have to do another one of these on. Yeah, it's like one of the school board meetings in Glendale that I was at where there was like full on like just like, yeah, the plate carrier, the Baofeng, which is like the official radio of like right-wing extremists, the whole thing, the plate carrier, the, you know, but I guess that's another conversation. That's what I wanted to ask you, though. I was curious because what was being described about this guy, I was wondering if we knew anything about, I don't know, his political leanings or group. No, nothing, huh?
Nothing. I mean, that's the thing is like there hasn't been anything written about him and anything that has come up in the investigation about him. Other than this is a case of like a family separation gone wrong. And, men often in these situations do not take it well and often take it out on their spouse and bring the kids into it somehow. And, that is as much as we know about it. We don't know where he stood politically or anything. We could probably infer, from the amount of guns he had and, those sorts of things. We also don't know very much about Savannah, which is a tragedy because, she is a teenage girl who got abducted and like, we don't know anything about her and her story and, who she was as a person, in many of these cases, they are a victim and that's kind of it. And I think that's very unfortunate and sort of what's being robbed from the public is, this girl that was tragically killed, what do we know about her and what sort of life did we lose in this situation?
Absolutely. It's a tough story. I felt like crying a couple of times, like honestly, like in the beginning of the show. And then just right now, it's just like, do you want to speak to maybe the, only if you want to, but the mental cost of reporting, of doing this job and anything you experienced, if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is part of like, reporting on this stuff. We forget that there are reporters on the other end who consume this content and who watch this content. And, this isn't the first like police shooting video I have watched, when LAPD releases their police shooting videos, I watch those just to kind of see how they frame it and how they, I break them down. And Sarah, on Twitter, she writes for Streets. I'll have to find she breaks down all of these videos and she does a great job of like dissecting and like criticizing and sort of like frame by frame going through what the police have said and what has actually happened to the point of like really adding a lot of skepticism to this. But in order to do that, you have to watch this over and over and over and just see people in the last moments of their life and oftentimes the fear and the terror that they face. And like, that's not easy. And then I watched this video, I got it on Friday and, I watched it and I kept watching it over and over because if you report on it, you got to make sure you get all your details right. Part of the horror of it was spared because in the shooting, she becomes a pixelated box as soon as she's shot, which kind of insinuates she's dead, which I almost think is like dehumanizing to a degree of like, you die and become a pixelated box to obstruct the horror of what happened, even though you go on Twitter and you can see the horror that's happening all across this world. And then later on, I had to go into work, my other job, because I have a whole other job. So it's just like the sort of like the reality of the world, and then just sort of like the inconsequential stuff of my other job. It's just like, and this is just stuff that like, I'm happy to view it and take it on and talk about it. This is kind of what I signed up for. But at the same time, it is a thing that just kind of sits on me. And the best I can hope for is like through that, if you can see what actually happened and I can report on it, that's fine. It's viewing this without an intention that I think would add up very, very quickly. But yeah, it just, I tell people it'll radicalize you more than anything else in the world is just witnessing these things over and over and then not having any repercussions follow. or any changes. And my big issue is these shootings keep happening and happening and happening, and that just compounds kind of like the weight of it all. It's just like which shooting will be the last shooting that just changes how we think about policing and how we think about use of force, and and you thought, wow, George Floyd might be that. But since George Floyd, police have killed more people than they ever have in history. So, at what point does that it still change?
I don't even think I don't even think I knew that post George Floyd, that what you just said. So it's hard to shock me, but even I'm shocked by that. And I follow this stuff pretty closely.
Yeah, it's Mapping Police Violence is the website, and they keep track of sort of each year, and last year was the highest year for police killings in America. And so it's just what has changed, what hasn't changed, what needs to change is sort of like the conversations that should be coming out of this. Meanwhile, cops have been given more money since 2020. They've been given more quote unquote training. So, these are the most invested, most trained police agencies now by their own admission.
Wow.
So why are they still killing people at high rates? And, other controversies that aren't even killing, but just them misusing their, power, that continues.
Yeah. I mean, I keep thinking about this issue we're talking about of transparency, because that police are given powers that are not, the ordinary person does not have. They can destroy your life in an instant. And they can also solve a case and do great things. I always want to be fair about that. I mean, but like what we're talking about here though is a lack of transparency, in that you're walking down the street, you can be destroyed. One police officer, one bad encounter. And so society and the money, I think like in LA, half of our budget goes to LAPD, or some, it's a large figure. You probably know.
It's about $3 billion a year that we give to the police. This most recent fiscal budget request was the highest budget increase to the department in its history. So it was like $200 and some million, one of which includes a new helicopter. So like, LAPD has 18 helicopters, more than some small countries. So it's about, just think of like how much money that is.
Yeah. What are we getting for this? That's what I always come back to. I think William Film the Police LA, who I know you know very well, I think I heard him say that recently. It's like, that's what the public needs to ask. It's a completely fair question. You could ask it about anybody, any single person, any institution. What are you getting for this? Are you getting, and is that worth it? Because that's the question, I think. I think about it a lot.
I think obviously people are going to have various degrees of answers to like what they're getting for that. Many people believe that a lot of policing and what they do could be eased, and a lot of these issues we're trying to solve with, police officers and guns and like carceral solutions can easily be solved by just improving people's lives, quality of lives, like access to education, healthcare, all of these things like could easily be mitigated investing in that rather than investing our money into the police. And we're now at a point now where the comptroller is saying we're at a hiring freeze for all of our open jobs for all of the other city agencies, streets and sanitation, lights, stuff that everyone uses, libraries, animal shelters. We can't hire more people because the LAPD has so far overspent their money by millions upon millions of dollars. And so now the consequences are going to grow exponentially because these cops just get a blank check for raises and for all of these other financial programs. Because the big thing now is we don't have enough cops. That's what they keep saying. We don't have enough police officers. And so now we need to hire more cops, which will just grow the budget of the police department even more, without even recognizing that, last year, the mayor and the former Chief Moore were bragging about how violent crime was down. At the same time, the amount of police officers we've had has decreased as well. They don't ever make those connections. Less police. Obviously, what you get for that money and what you want them to do are two different things. And I think generally the public is unified that what we're paying for and what we're spending all of our money is not an investment that has paid off. The police have recently taken on organized retail crime, which has resulted in them essentially just being loss prevention officers outside of Target and such.
Highly paid.
And arresting. Yeah, it's just like, we don't need you. Yeah. They have the pictures of the hall of the person that they arrested. And it's pimple patches and, just dumb shit. And it's we have someone we pay $150,000 a year to track down somebody walking out with stuff at a Target. Come on. It's that alone is people might disagree with, but do we want our police doing that day in and day out while people complain about not getting cops to show up in a reasonable amount of time, or these sorts of things?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, the loss prevention. So that's also a conversation about, I think it would be fair to say, I would use the phrase corruption in media, as those stories were pumped into papers by trade groups. And we're able to do that. That's also a conversation about what we do. When you're getting information from someone, it's one of the first things I think of, right? Who is this person? Why are they telling me this, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a thing of I think you and I both know this, but there is an issue of media literacy in the world. And I think that's why we're so susceptible, and this is not obviously we give the right-wing people a lot of shit for it with QAnon and all of this other narratives about Biden and, but it goes both ways. We are easily deceived because media literacy is so low that we can't decipher or even investigate ourselves the reality of what's being said. And for me, my skepticism is always cops lie. Do not take what cops say to be the truth, which is very much against what most modern, news agencies, especially the broadcast news agencies, we call them cops stenographers. So they essentially just write what the cops say, and they use things like officer involved shooting,
right? Which
you and I, as journalists, an editor would be that's passive voice. And that doesn't really describe what happens, and it exonerates, you're not
supposed to use that anymore too. I could have sworn AP style guide said not to use it, but yeah, no, please continue.
Yeah. Cause it's not clear. And it's, officer involved shooting is a long form way of saying cop shot someone. And I think by using that, you kind of obstruct who was doing the action. And so that's why they still use it. Cops do, is because it says, well, the officer was involved. And so it became a meme, and partially why LAPD's public information account, it has no comments. You can't comment on their post because everyone was well, how was the officer involved? Because that's never answered. We get all the answers on how the victim was involved and a lot of insinuations on what they did or didn't do. But we don't have anything, when the cops talk about these things, that's often left out. And I think you're starting to see, especially with my colleagues, of rethinking how we interact with what cops say and what they're saying and what they're putting out into the world, with a degree of skepticism that I think most people who aren't media literate or really confirmation bias want to hear.
Right.
LAPD has 20 some odd people on the force that deal with media relations. These are people who have script supervisors and sort of like, if you're going to use LAPD in a TV show, you have to have everything approved by the LAPD. Well, you're not going to do anything critical about the LAPD because they're the one watching it. And obviously, the military does this for movies and such. Like, you got to get the okay,
Right.
if you want to use military resources or something,
Yeah, exactly. And and the way I look at it too is you have to be skeptical of as a reporter and just as a person. I'm skeptical of every institution, like police, everybody. It could be anybody. Everything. The saying in reporting, if your mother says she loves you, check it out, right? Like I treat every source I talk to, every institution, and in every newsroom, but on this topic though, for sure, in every newsroom in the country, wherever the crime reporters sit, the press release from about George Floyd should be hanging there. It should be hanging there. When we just talk about that, and like I said, I believe that everybody lies a lot. You may feel the same way. We're here having this conversation about what happened within San Bernardino, but you have to verify everyone. I don't care who it is, the city, I don't know, city attorney, the accountant, I don't know, the whole everybody. But that press release should be hanging in the wall because it's a lie from start to finish, except for that a man died, that George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else there, was not true, and that should be a reminder if you're going to cover institutions about what they're going to try to do.
Yeah, and part of that is just knowing how they operate and why they do and lie about things or like obstruct or those sorts of things. And that's where, for me, public records has been sort of that avenue of like getting a little bit deeper, because for an agency like the police department, they control a lot of incidents of what they're involved with, like body cam footage, actual facts. They hold all that power in that relationship. And it's just like, well, yeah, they're going to use that to their advantage. They're not going to come out and say we fucked up. I don't know the last time they did that. Other than, I wrote a story about them arresting drone users downtown LA and lying about that. And like,
well, they sorry to interrupt you. They just to confirm, they were arresting people and the law was wrong. They got the law wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, they our $3 billion police agency does not understand federal preemption and airspace, which is something you would imagine a police force that has 18 helicopters and a whole aero division would understand who can write laws about who can use airspace. And the FAA, controls that. They control how high you can fly, who can fly, where you can fly. Cities can't do that. They can't regulate that. And that is really the base of that conversation. Now, LAPD was going on Twitter, their official accounts, and saying, well, downtown LA is within 5 miles of an FAA facility. It's not. There's no FAA airport or facility 5 miles from downtown LA. And you have, in order to do that, you have to get express permission from air traffic controller of a tower or something. Well, first off, there are no towers downtown LA for helipads or anything. So who would you call to get permission from? Secondly, the FAA said you don't even need permission from air traffic control. That's actually not right. You need LAANC approval, which can be done on your phone. And there it'll tell you what's controlled airspace or not. So you go on the website, you go, okay, I want to fly my drone right here by, the abandoned towers, with the graffiti or whatever. All you do is put it in your little app, and within seconds, it'll be like, yeah, you can fly. Woohoo. That's it. And so the law, the way it is written, is not valid as it is. It was inaccurate the way it was written, so it was layers of thing. Mind you, in their comments, helicopter pilots, drone users were all calling them out on this, and they were fighting against it, being like, "Oh no, this is the law. If you don't like it, you can challenge the law. How we challenge laws." And I pressed them on this multiple times, and they never answered my questions about it. Instead, they were like, "Here's the official sheet that said we have stopped pursuing these charges and arresting people," and that was it. They never admitted they were wrong. They never admitted that they unjustly arrested 9 people in the past 2 months, who all they were doing is flying near the graffiti tower in downtown LA. They were all arrested within the same area. Mind you, again, this is back to what we get for our police. We've spent over $300,000 in overtime for them to monitor this abandoned building, and all they've done is arrest drone users for making content.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's not what. We're paying them a $3 billion police agency to harass some kid flying a drone. Come on, that's bored cop 101 of just I'm looking for something. This is it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what when we were talking about accountability. So it's I'm not a person. That's another long conversation, but I believe that as someone who's covered oligarchs and various people who truly many times are able to operate above the law. I believe we need a system of justice it's not going to work without some kind of authority. I believe that, but what we're talking about here, this is not sustainable. And like you said, they didn't even get the law right. And arresting somebody one time, your name goes into a system, your life can be changed. And every arrest in this country, in effect, is a conviction. That's the problem, because have you been arrested on a job application? And they could throw the charges out. It comes up in a background check. So it's like, what is the purpose of all this? And I'm glad you brought up that story, because that kind of blew my mind. I was like, wait, this wasn't even this was not a black and white situation. It was you didn't have the right to arrest them, period. And I'm not a person who's easily surprised by anything.
That's yeah. I mean, that was the thing. And I ended up finding one of the this is a kid, I would say late teens, early 20s, who was flying this drone. And I found one of the people who got arrested, and I was talking to him, and he was like, "Oh, can you send me what you have so I can bring it to court?" Because he still had to go to court. He woke up at 5 a.m. to go to court. That was on his ticket, and he showed up, and the clerk was like, the police officer hasn't filed the ticket yet. So the case, essentially this is open until he files the ticket. And so this kid was just like, "Oh, so now I have this thing hanging over my head for an extended period of time, not knowing what's going to happen." Mind you, they took his drone. And so he then was he went to where it was on the ticket of where his drone was supposedly, which is the metropolitan, downtown LA. And he went there and he waited and waited. And then somebody was like, "Oh, it's not here. It's at this other facility." And so he drove all the way over there. And then they were like, "Oh, the person who handles this isn't here yet." And so it took him a week later to get his drone back. But working people, from 5 a.m. till whatever throughout the afternoon would have to take a day off of work just to do this. And so now you're taking money out of people's pockets who should be at work, over something frivolous like this that you didn't even have the legal authority to do. I don't know. I think once you start adding the consequences beyond we think, homicides and all that, that's a minor part of what police do on a day-to-day basis. And it is mostly concerning that they don't know the law. What other laws and sort of these codes are they using to basically stop people, probably to, pretextual stop, where they're trying to see if they can find more, who knows?
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, if a significant amount of funds need to be allocated, it should be towards homicides and crimes that really that are at the top of the list, right? That are where justice needs to be found. And I think another conversation is that some of this, I think, has fallen on it. Society has asked incorrectly, I think, or at least this society, to make a police officer into a Superman, right? You're the same person you're calling for something that is where someone needs to show up, something important. You're asking for the person who's got the cat in the tree. It's impossible because there's no Superman out there. And that's a conversation that the public has to have too, that's asking that is absurd of anybody. So anyway, just on that topic.
Right. Yeah. Right. I think obviously the big thing in LA is the unhoused community. And we dedicate millions upon millions of dollars for cops to show up and be present at encampment sweeps where they come in and take all their tents and stuff and make them move. That is not a good use of resources. That helps nobody. That just gives cops something to do to stand around because they don't help find service providers. They don't feed or give water to these people. They don't, connect them with anything that they need. They're just there to make sure the city can destroy their stuff and move them. And when you're looking at what we are spending our money on, imagine if we took that money and invested it into supportive housing or mental health clinicians or unarmed response. So many cities have success with these sort of I guess people who are trained, specifically trained. You can't really train a cop to do this. You have to have somebody who has the compassion and care to want to do this and then want to not result in use of force and understand kind of mental health and how to de-escalate. Cops don't know how to de-escalate. They're not very good at it. They do a very good job at escalating. Go to any protest in LA, watch how easily they can escalate a crowd.
You don't think it'd be possible, huh? I was just asking. You don't. Yeah, I'm just curious.
I think necessarily. No. I think that's this whole policing as an institution see the solution to the scenario as carceral, as arrest, as ticket, as anything else. And I don't think that's for that situation, it's not needed. We don't need to criminalize being unhoused.
Yep.
If they're using drugs or whatever, we all use drugs or we use drugs in the safety of our home. The issue isn't to criminalize them for using drugs. The issue is to reduce the harm of them doing drugs and getting them to a place where if they wish to be sober, they can be. And cops, just in that scenario, for a lot of people, don't trust authority and don't trust someone with a gun and have had bad interactions with police. I don't think that's a job for them. And so when we start thinking about, wow, we have a reduced police force and we're spreading them all across doing these dumb activities, or activities they aren't qualified to do, why aren't we rethinking where we put personnel? Now, mind you, we can't hire any more mental health people or anything because there's hiring freezes because we spend all our money on police. So, I'm of the camp of not having police. Obviously, I understand that whereas a position that's not where a lot of people are. And so
it's an open forum. It's a dialogue. Please continue.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm just trying to I understand that where I stand with it is not where everyone else stands. And so, but I think there's a lot of similarities in where I come from of this sort of abolitionist sort of idea of it's always a moving piece. It's never a finished state. It is work in progress. And so maybe we get to a point of abolition, who knows? But we could do work to that point that I think most of the public would agree is a better use of our money and our resources and how we interact with society as a whole. And, if policing and incarceration made us safer and made the world a better place, we would be the safest and, most perfect society in the world. But history has shown that that's not the case. It doesn't, the war on drugs hasn't stopped drugs. The war on terror hasn't stopped terror. So at what point do we look at, rather than using force and carceral and punishment as a solution to these problems, and really rethink how we operate as a society, as a community, rather than outsourcing our social problems onto an external police force of just like handling and being that buffer. I just think we really have to rethink how we relate to each other. Obviously, that's long term. We got to change how we interact. But I'm of the mind we should be working towards getting rid of as much police as possible. And if cops aren't special people that can solve murders, we're investigative journalists. We figure shit out all the time. It's
true.
So it's just, you don't need, I guess, cops for a lot of things. And I think we just got to rethink about how we do that. And that's just kind of where we're stuck.
Right.
Which is, we want to do more, but the police also want more money. And so this threat of like police not having money, defunding, means we're not safe. And so long as police kind of control that idea of like, if police don't have a massive budget every year, that we're not safe, then nothing's ever going to change, because all of this is about perception. Police know that viral videos, narratives on TV, if the cops say it's not safe, it's not safe, and this is where that media literacy comes back. And this, the skepticism that I think people really need to have, that I think, you and I both understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I believe that policing, law enforcement, criminal justice system, the phrase you want to use, I believe that should be reserved for, like I said, like I'm talking like, I'm not even talking about LA. I'm talking about the criminal, the oligarchs of the world, the people who are rob people blind and or let's say a homicide, something like that. The things that really need to be addressed. This one-stop shop for, I'm having a problem and I'm going to call this, I'm going to make this call, is mostly been a disaster. And especially on the mental health crisis, as you said, like that is terrible. So I think you and I probably see things pretty similarly. We might see things a little differently, but that's a good thing. I mean, that's how we're going to come to a solution. And that's what I want to do on this channel is really just, you're here to talk about the big story you wrote at The Guardian, but this is an important conversation. And what are we getting for this money? And when you pick up the phone to call, I didn't used to think about that as much. Not that I'm calling the police that often, but it's not something I used to think about. After George Floyd, of course, it's not that I didn't think about that before, but now it's something a lot of people think about more. I heard I'm pretty sure that the guy who called that day, that the guy who owned the store, who called the police when George Floyd came in, I think he said he wished he never did that again. So obviously, so these are important conversations. And I asked people if anyone had a few questions for Joey, and I'm just going to take a look. Actually, I want to do something real quick. Joey, I'm guessing you probably can't see the chat, but a couple things I want to do, guys. Oh, can you see it? Oh, no worries. No. All right. First thing I'm doing, guys, I'm putting in Joey's article at The Guardian, written with Sam Levin. This is the last time I could ask you. It's Levin, right? Sam Levin.
Yeah.
Did I say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who is a great. He's based in LA. All of his reporting is amazing in terms of he's the reason why I partnered with him, is because of how he has written about police shootings. And really just centering the victims and the impacted families, and really take the police, not at their word, and really kind of investigating them further. And I think he's done a really good job of kind of reporting on these issues, and it's why I partnered with him.
Absolutely. I put that link in there so you guys can read the story in full. I am. Oh, where is the other? Darn, I had it set up. I was going to give them the. Let me see if I can pull it up. The link to the actual public records, which I had ready, and then okay. I don't have it. Joey had posted it because I wanted you guys to be able to look at it for yourself, and he had posted it on Twitter.
Oh yeah,
But no, it's funny because I had it ready, but no worries.
It's all good. I'll reshare it.
Yeah. I'll wait. Sorry, say that again.
I'll reshare it on Twitter,
and I'll figure out a way to get that in here, maybe. All right. So then, also on that note, channel support. Man, I wish I had this all planned too. I actually did put it in the chat, and then all right. Well, the best laid plans, right? Channel support, real quick, guys. The fact is that Joey should be telling the story on every network. Joey and Sam, who reported it, and I'm really happy to have him here. But this kind of thing needs to be everywhere. So if you appreciate this kind of discussion, I put our link tree in there. If you want to support this channel, it takes money to do everything, unfortunately. So if anyone wants to support us, it's much appreciated. There was one more thing. Were you looking for the archive?
I found it. I sent it in the private chat.
Oh, really? Sweet. Thanks, man. Oh, yeah. There it is. Perfect.
So it's on Archive, Internet Archive. There are download options, and it's a zip file. So all you got to do is hit the zip.
I put it in the chat.
Yeah, on the right side, and download it, and it'll have all of the videos, all the raw footage, plus the critical incident video.
It's all there. I put it in the chat. Obviously, as you guys know, it's a be careful. These are things you only want to look if you're comfortable. But I thought it was really important to share that when I saw Joey had posted it on Twitter. Adam had a great question here, Joey. Do you think the use of non-lethal weapons would help mitigate the kinds of tragedies you report on? What do you think about that?
That is, I think, out of all the alternatives to kind of sort of these things, I think there's some issues with that I'll point out in like previous instances, which is like, there have been a couple videos that I've watched, especially of LAPD, who have used their 40 millimeter foam rounds that they use at protests and such on people. And I think I know at least of one, and I know there are others, them firing that has also resulted in police firing lethal rounds at the same time. And it's a contagious fire, essentially, is what they call it. Is like cops are in these states, they hear gunfire of some sort, and they freak out and just start unloading because they're so high on adrenaline in those moments. And so there are times where that has made things worse. I will say there are times where those aren't effective, have not been effective, at least in the police's eyes, of subduing someone. If you are in a specific state, pain is not accessible to you and kind of something you can escape. There are times where they kind of just bounce off people. So that's obviously a thing. I also want to just say that a lot of these weapons, these less lethal weapons, can actually be deadly as well. Just in Phoenix, Arizona, they used a beanbag round, on somebody to subdue them, and that beanbag round killed them. You can take out people's eyes, you can really injure and maim people with them. And anyone at a protest these past 4 years will tell you, like, they can really fuck you up. Somebody lost a testicle getting hit in the groin. Like,
oh man,
there are so many like auxiliary, like things that can happen with these. Now, same thing goes for tasers. LAPD uses them. There have been times it causes people to have heart attacks or exacerbate health problems. So it really comes down to how they're engaging with the situation, where the person is at. If someone is in a state where they're not going to feel pain from a 40 millimeter foam round, which is very large, and I say foam as like it's not soft at all, but it's not like a bullet, if they can't really infer that at all, then that's maybe not a person in a state where police agitating people can really help. So yeah, maybe there are cases where it might be helpful. But I think in recent cases where it has been used, it's been counteracted by police behavior and using lethal force. And the person that they killed holding the plastic spoon or fork, they had less lethals, and the cops still use lethal force. So it's a really like case by case situation, but there are a lot of times where it's not effective at all. And I think that's why then they resort to lethal force.
Great answer. Great question by Adam. And I agree. Yeah. It's what we've learned is that, first of all, many of these, the name itself is less lethal, and they're not, right? People have died from a taser. As you said, you can be maimed and hurt. Sorry, I know some of this discussion is disturbing. And I appreciate that to everybody that we're having it. Right. It's not actually less lethal, but that's a great question by Adam. Let me see if anybody else. Joe, is there any way for people to support you? I put your Twitter in there, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to share.
Yeah. I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. I do a lot of just kind of like little reporting that I do that maybe doesn't have like a big story, but a lot of it's public records centric. You and I met covering sort of the far right, so there's still some of that I track and keep an eye on. Obviously, I'm not as visual in that world because I was too visual for them, and some of them can be very threatening, and that's something I can handle. But I also have people in my life who I don't want to have that happen to. So I kind of do that in the background. But I have a portfolio page, and on there I have a Patreon that, when we're talking about kind of how the sausage is made with investigative journalists and reporting, I spend countless hours doing work to write a story on my end of research, of records requests, reading thousands of pages of public records. All of that is often unpaid. Obviously, that has not stopped me because I really enjoy it. But oftentimes when I write a story, it doesn't reflect all the work that went into it. And sometimes stuff I just want to find out on my own or for the public. So I have a portfolio page on there. I have a Patreon. I have a Venmo. I have my social media, which is always great. Just sharing my work is huge. And just it's just a great way to kind of support what I do. And as I start kind of like growing my reach, like you are with this, sort of like, this has kind of been something I've thought about doing because I think it's just a really cool way to just talk about this stuff. But yeah, as I start thinking about growing, sort of reaching people with my work, that also costs time and money. And I have to work a whole other job to kind of support my reporting. So at some point I can get away from working a whole other job. That would be great. So yeah, share my work, those sorts of things as well.
This field is, I've shared, just want to say too, I paused there because I shared Joey's portfolio, we just talked about. I've also shared, Joey's coming up big time, not just at the Guardian, but he made his debut in Wired. I just shared that one too. Big story
Yes.
there. And I want to make sure because that's yeah, you're coming up, man. We used to hang out at, we used to stand outside LAPD headquarters.
Yeah,
Coming up fast.
this is the thing. I had a whole professional job before the pandemic. I got let go, and I was just I these were sort of skills that I just would kind of itch, every once in a while. And then, being on the ground and like documenting the protests and just sort of like that sort of like radicalized me in a way of just like, oh, maybe I should write about this stuff because I know how to do records requests. I've been finding all this stuff and like, the shot spotter stuff was something, and it was just like one of those blatant things where I'm like, shot spotter is just phrenology of like gunshots. It's a technology that's just so bullshit that like I can't believe people fall for it. And so that was just one of those things where I was just like, all right, Pasadena uses it. They're the closest to LA. Let's see what I can find. And then from there, it's just been this ongoing project of like pointing out how useless this technology is. But yeah, I had no idea this is where I would kind of end up with this at all. I just thought I would be a guy who live tweeted protests and rallies and vigils. And, it just goes to show that like whatever gatekeepy sort of like elitist bullshit journalism has, it's bullshit. Like if there's anybody ever in this industry that you interact with who's just like doubts you or does, you didn't go to J school, so like you can't be a journalist, that sort of bullshit is just like, don't listen to them and just reach out to me or reach out to other people like Eric or just like people who just do this. Like I didn't need permission to do it. You don't need permission to do it. Just do it well and respect the industry and sort of like how we do this job, and don't try to make it worse for us either. Don't be fucking these little like shit far right streamers and stuff who go around just don't go that route. Just be honest, be transparent about what you're doing. Forget about this idea of objectivity. There's no objectivity in journalism. There are obviously facts. There are things of like,
you don't think so, huh?
Happening.
I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I'm interested in that topic.
I think objectivity benefits those in power. It benefits those who rely on objectivity to be a thing, and that assumes that your audience. It's like people who try to like refute QAnon people and Trump supporters with facts. It's like none of that is relevant to them because they don't exist in the same sphere of understanding the world. And so I think that's where this idea of objectivity comes from. Is just like maybe showing them what's actually real isn't what's working. And like, part of that is because, you can't trust journalists because they're biased or whatever. It's like, yeah, we're all fucking biased. Like, we're all advocates for what we report on, like, wow, I'm biased against far right extremists. Wow. Like, sorry, the other response to be objective is I would then have to like humanize them or like interview them in a way that gives them equal platform. And you and I both know that like giving them that space and this idea of objectivity legitimizes them. And I think we got to be mindful of like how we legitimize stuff like that under the guise of objectivity. And so that's where I'm like, there are facts. It's just like, if someone says it's raining and another person says it's not raining, the old motto is you look out the window and find out if it's raining or not. It's like,
absolutely. When I report on the radical right, which I've done a lot of, like, I will like, I'll humanize them in terms of if that's what the truth is. But my reporting, the difference is, just to be absolutely clear, and on Joey's point, I'm not going to negate the horrors that those people have put on the world. That's the problem with some of these. Famously, the New York Times had that profile with the guy in the neo-Nazi in Ohio, that he likes to listen to Wilco or whatever. It was like the same music I do. No, like, yes, your job as a reporter is to find the truth, and that person, a path led them there. a path could lead them out. So you want to tell the full picture of that person, but of course that is important. But yeah, you don't want to be like, oh wow, look, like he lives in a nice suburban house too. Like who cares? That's not what this is about. It's about the truth, which can be unpleasant to a lot of people. I've had people get mad at me. You don't always know where that, as a reporter, like we don't really have friends. Like, I'm sure some activists probably got mad at you sometime for whatever. It's like, hey man, like I'm here to do a job. Like, the truth can be unpleasant, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially with like the far right stuff, it's just like, the story is like humanizing them in a way of like, look how this seemingly normal person can end up down this path of like believing QAnon, and like, what is it about QAnon or these sorts of like thoughts and, white nationalism and such that attract seemingly normal people. And so the story is like, what is underneath all of that? And people will debate on like what that all is, but like to think these people are idiots, I think is half true. These people are like QAnon alone, like you can see the capability of people's thought process and like creativity and sort of like what we do as investigative journalists. They've just have put that energy into conspiracies, That's the fascinating thing about, for me, conspiracies is this idea of like, well, we kind of all agree on the basic premise, which is the government lies to us.
Yeah.
It's like, so what about that opens up this like, Pandora's box of like, JFK is a reptile, or like, these sorts of things of like globalists or like anti-Semitic things of like, how does that fit into that whole scheme of thought? And that's to me is like really the story about conspiracies. And it's like, yes, there are people who benefit from it. And there are people like, what is it about Mike Flynn and all of these people who, really play up these QAnon things? Like, a lot of the times these people are victims, and then they make other people victims. And there's often people who are responsible for that. And I think it's to separate, the Alex Jones of the world, which is like the culprit, and like investigate, well, why does that work? And like, what is it about him that attracts people? And how do we combat that? And how do we talk about that to also, the more we talk shit about it, the more it like legitimizes them. It's like, yeah, the people are against us. They're NPCs. Like,
they hate me.
It just plays into that.
Yeah. I believe in, and I think someone posted in the chat, Adam did. I mean, I humanize with accountability. Like that's one of the problems. And then we'll wrap this up, because I know we all have something to do today. It's been a really, really great conversation. It's like, for example, with J6, January 6th, like, which I've worked on as a reporter and as an investigator too, outside of reporting and being a researcher and working at a nonprofit. And I do a lot of different things, is what I'm trying to say. But the lack of accountability, that's one of my biggest, what's like hurt me the most personally about January 6th. It's like, whatever brought you there, you committed those crimes, and you need to be held accountable. We don't need any more glossy profiles. It's over. You need to be held accountable. And that's like one of the, like, you bringing it back to what you said about the far right. It's like, I'll do my best to tell the story that I see and do honest reporting, but it's just this lack of accountability with just one particular group. And the only other point I'll make on, like, some of these stories will often talk about the things that happened to you, and bad home life, you were beaten. Those are terrible things. I would never say they weren't, but many people go through things just like that. You have your own, I'm sure you have your own, trials and tribulations. So do I. they don't end up storming the Capitol, and we shouldn't be excusing stuff like that. And we shouldn't be excusing that. That's all I wanted to say. Many people,
Yeah, no, I think that's like a really the big point of like, especially J6 is like,
right.
People have this idea of like redneck hillbilly, Jethro sort of like caricature of like the people who stormed the Capitol. But like you and I have like interacted with people in Beverly Hills who stormed the Capitol. Like we know people in Beverly Hills, California, where there was a weekly Trump rally, of like, these aren't just backwoods rednecks. Like these are people who live in affluent neighborhoods and like, so like seemingly, Shiva or whoever, it's like a child's dance teacher. It's like, what happened that we got there? But at the same time, they've also tried to kick our ass and shit. And it's just this like, I've had a fucked up life, but I also don't, like Hitler. So like, I feel like that's a very easy thing to do, is to not like Hitler or to not be, a Christian nationalist or those sorts of things. It's just like, I don't know. I think we should be more curious in terms of like how people end up there and what about these things, rather than, oh, he listens to Wilco and he volunteers at the PTA and like
he likes the same music I do.
Yeah, it's like, I love heavy metal. Like heavy metal has a huge Nazi problem. It doesn't mean we're allies. It doesn't mean we're friends. It's like, why do Nazis like black metal, and why does black metal support not? There's a conversation about culture and aesthetics and like that I think is missing. And I think, I don't know. You and I know this, but like that I think is the bigger investigation. And then obviously, our job is to out them. I think my responsibility is to be like, hey, this person's a piece of shit. They should be well known, and we should document them. And I think this is where, back to the policing thing, is like police are incapable of fighting this problem. The police do not do a very good job of far right extremism, and it's largely because they're sympathetic to it. And that's where I think activists who out these people is a far more useful thing, rather than incarcerating people for being pieces of shit. Because a lot of times all of this is legal. They can go out there and have these fucking rallies and be Patriot Front and march in their stupid khakis. The difference is the cops aren't going to stop them. They're actually going to protect them and allow them to do that because it's the First Amendment, So what do you as a society and as a person in that community respond to? And I think that is the more important way of tackling this, is to make it so unwelcome and so unfriendly to be a piece of shit Nazi or a Patriot Front guy that like, it's not a thing that people, clamor over or idolize. They see it as like a dork,
Yeah. I mean, and that's what my friend, and who I'm sure you know too, activist Daryl Lamont Jenkins says from One People's Project. Hey, same thing. Hate has consequences. You can go out there. First Amendment lets you go out there and, aside from the crimes that have often go with these people too, but you go out there and march, whatever. If it's First Amendment protected, you can do it. But you also may be identified, because it's also likely that that's not just what you're going to do. You're going to Patriot Front went to Idaho, and they all got, in that famous incident, got arrested, and they weren't there to just walk around. They were there to hurt people and to cause, they're Nazi, they're neo-Nazis. So, to harass people and hurt people. So,
it's always ethical to punch a Nazi, everyone's debating, and when,
I'm not going to comment on that, but I'm going to,
no, go ahead, I'm not going to support it. I'm not going to, tell you to go do that. But,
you say your piece.
I think it's always ethical to do that. And I think it should be, Richard Spencer famously got hit in the face, and what's he up to these days? Like, I think like you should be vilified, you should be shamed, at any point you want to exist in public like that, I think it should not be a thing. Like, I guess the question is, why do they feel so comfortable doing this? Why do they feel? Because there's no consequences. And that famous video of them Patriot Front coming out of the U-Hauls in Philly, and then all of a sudden they fucking get their asses kicked, and it's just like, I don't think they're going to go to Philly anytime soon.
Probably not. No, probably not.
Philly's a great city, but they also don't take no shit, and I think they learned their lesson there. But
yeah, So I want to thank you for coming on. And again, the links are in the chat, guys. You can support Joey. His links are in there. His work. I put in the story that he wrote with the Guardian, and the Wired article. I also wanted to say something else real quick. It's fun, like, by the way, invariably, I'm literally saying something that's important to me, and the helicopter is flying overhead, which is likely LAPD, because that's pretty much the only helicopter that comes around here.
Yes, or fly that low.
Yeah. Like, and I've talked about that. What I wanted to say was, I wanted to say rest in peace, Savannah Graziano, and who's known as a victim of a terrible crime, and we're not gonna, like you said earlier, Joe, we're not gonna know what she would have become, and but because of you and Sam, we know the truth now. There might be even more to know, but we know the truth, and that's what it's all about. And that's all I wanted to say, man. Like, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly why I do this. Is I hope that we realize that, like, these victims are people, and so much is written about them as criminals, or like whatever led up and whatever happened in that moment is the last thing that we ever know about them. And since 2020, I've been covering and documenting and speaking with impacted families throughout Los Angeles and elsewhere about, their loved one's death. And I think that's what our jobs are, is to not have that story end with their death, but like who they were and how can we stop it. And I think that's always kind of that follow-up that I think is always missing in these stories. It's just like, there are kids, there are wives, there are partners, there are, grandparents who all lost someone. And in a lot of the cases, they didn't deserve to die, and they shouldn't have died, and they did. And, how do we honor them and report about them is by talking about them. And unfortunately for Savannah, we'll never know who she becomes. And all we know is that she shouldn't have died. And that's part of that. The story doesn't end here. That's the thing. Right. It doesn't end just right here. This is just the beginning. So this isn't my end of telling that story, but yeah, if anyone out there has any stuff they want to leak me as well, I'll share my Signal username.
I'll share it right now. Yeah.
I got to find out what I don't have to share my phone number now. Thank you, Signal.
Yeah. I really wish they had come up with that before that.
It is Joey. There. That's my my Signal username. So make sure you set up your username on Signal. There's a whole way to do that. Just OPSEC and taking care of yourselves out there in the world.
That's right. That's Joey's Signal name. Signal is the app that, it's the everybody should use Signal. So I actually kind of wanted to put the link in there for Signal, but I don't know if I can put it in. Well, okay, you guys will find it. Joey, I really want to just thank you for coming on again, and I hope you have just a great rest of your day. Okay.
Yeah, I'm down to do this anytime, my friend.
Let's do it. All right, you guys take care.